at the cusp of a new world? Some say yes. Today we meet and learn more about the leaders of this new world. Meet Generation Z.
They've been called smarter than boomers and far more ambitious than millennials. They're Generation Z, and they're about to take over your planet. While this new wave of young people is utterly connected in the technological sense, and among them are some of the world's greatest achievers, including a recent Nobel Prize winner, some say they're disturbingly disconnected in matters of faith and spirituality. Coming up, researchers give a sneak peek at what the world might expect from Gen Z. Don Tapscott, author of Growing Up Digital, offers his perspective. But first, here is guest host Sheldon Neil with some of Gen Z's most remarkable ambassadors.
Welcome to Context. I'm Sheldon Neil, guest hosting for Lorna Duick. But today I am actually not alone, helping us explore Generation Z. Meet our special guest host, and I'm hoping, the title guest host will look good on his CV. Gen Zer himself. Context, make some noise for Aiden Chan. Very good, very good. Aiden, thank you so much for being on the show. Now,
glad to be here.
Oddly enough, this show is actually all about you. Is that good news?
That's great news.
Well, I have to stop you right there. It's maybe not all about you. It's about your generation and, the promise, or we'll see how much of that is fact or fiction. But you are no stranger to exploring the world of multimedia and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I love using social media. I use Facebook. I love YouTube. I love making multimedia presentations like short documentaries about current news events. I love current affairs. I love keeping up to date to those kind of things.
And we're actually showing some of the clips from one of your short films. You've made 3, one on the fall of the USSR, one on the Occupy movement, one on cyber crime.
Yep.
Now, I know I'm not the only person asking this, how old are you first?
I'm 14 years old, and I'm in grade 9.
14 years old. Some people have shirts in here that are, they've had longer than 14 years. I have to ask, where does all this passion come to make these films?
Well, as I said before, I love current affairs. I love keeping up to date what's going on in the world, and I love making movies. I think that's the best kind of multimedia presentation for media you can have. So putting those together, I love making documentaries. Man, I am so happy you're here on the show. Give me a high five, my friend. Aiden's going to help me explore Generation Z a lot more. Let's make a context welcome for Aiden, everybody. Well, it's time to learn more about Aiden's generation, Generation Z, and, full stop. I know we live in Canada, and I should be saying Generation Z, right? Well, Generation Z, it's talking about something that is worldwide, affecting 2 billion. So I'm not saying I'm not in love with the fair and native land. I'm talking about, Canada, but we're talking about the whole world as well. And plus, Generation Z tends to sound a little bit better on TV. Well, let's get started with In 60. All right. Yes, very good, very good. Very good. All right, so they influence household purchases. They're out to change the world, and they walk among us. Meet Generation Z, short form Gen Z. We're talking about those who are now 5 to 20 years old. Most Gen Zers say that when it's their turn to join the workforce, they want jobs that produce a social impact, and they want their own business. They've grown up digital, they think differently than those who've come before them, and research shows they're more tolerant of racial, sexual, and generational diversity. Some researchers though say, it might be a little too early to put all of our eggs in one basket when it comes to Generation Z, but that isn't slowing the speculation. So let's put this all in focus. Well, helping us understand the latest research, data, and everything in between on Generation Z, I sat down with Robert Barnard, CEO of youth research engine Decode, to learn more. Take a look at this. What are the markers that make Generation Z unique when compared to generations prior?
There's 4 areas that we look at in understanding what makes a generation unique over another generation. The first one is looking at technology and the technology and media that they grow up with. It's all about their formative experiences. What's what happens in their formative experiences tends to make them kind of build their characteristics, their personality as a generation. The second one is their family and kind of friends dynamics and the situation there, because what we see is that as families change, so do the way that youth experience formative experiences. So literally how far can they walk alone is something that we would look at each generation. The third area is looking at the education system and the way they learn. So as education systems change, we can see that generations also start to change their personality and the things that they do. And the final one is just big events. We look at the big events that are happening in society during their formative years, and then those events really help us characterize what's going to condition them for their generational personality.
You explained that there are dangers, actually, to defining a generation too early. What are those dangers? And if so, what is the proper way to examine generation to generation?
I think, we've been studying and looking at generations now for 20 years. We started with Generation X, we went to Generation Y, now we're looking at Generation Z. And I think we often see early pundits making assertions about a generation based on very, very early stats and trying to paint the entire generation with that brush. And I think it's important to look at some of the early signs, but make sure you track those over time.
You make distinctions between generational traits and life stage traits across generations. What do you mean by that?
We see these patterns show up. When we wrote our first book on Generation X, we talked about how important this generation was and all these characteristics around Generation X. Well, lo and behold, most of those characteristics and trait showed up in books about Generation Y. And we think they're going to show up again about Generation Z. In fact, based on the interviews I'm getting, a lot of those things are coming up again. So it's really not necessarily generational traits that people are talking about. It's youthful traits. It's about the stage of youth that people are connecting to.
Looking at the emergence of certain movements like We Day, for example, you're looking at arenas chock full of youth 18 and under who are there charged up for social change, and some could look at that and say, well, these characteristics are exactly the characteristics explained and expressed in the research for Generation Z. I'm curious to understand and know, what do these movements mean to you and your analysis of Generation Z?
We Day and just some of the other movements you mentioned are a great example of formative experiences. So within the school system in Canada, there's been an increasing emphasis on volunteerism and societal impact. And that's been going on for about 20 years, but really has ramped up in the last 10 years or so. And so what we see is a generation that says that's normal. And we can even see it in their attitudes towards volunteerism generally, that the Generation Z is more interested, in fact, in volunteerism than Generation Y was.
Research on our nation's connectivity to religion is on the decline. Church attendance is on the decline, and there's been several studies about that. If spiritual connectivity among Generation Z is on the decline, does that necessarily mean that that generation will need something else, something better, bigger perhaps, than religion or something else to connect to interact spiritually?
We aren't seeing a huge uptick in their interest in religion so far in the work that we've done, this Generation Z. And it was already low, so it's less than 20% as far as just what they're interested in compared to music and film, which is like 70–80% interest, for example. So that's the gap that religion would have to get over. I think in some of the areas, we look at the attitudes towards leaders in society, and we would put religious or spiritual leaders in there. And they would respect those leaders more than politicians, for example. So spiritual leaders do a little bit better than politicians. They do worse than doctors and lawyers and bankers, but they're not at the very bottom, but they're kind of in they're in the lower third of as far as respected leaders. But we see a little bit of a improvement in that from looking at the work that we've done in the past in generations. That Generation Z might be a little bit more open to religious or spiritual leaders from various areas.
We have in studio with us Lauren Clemenger, the youngest person to ever appear before a Canadian parliamentary committee. Let's welcome her to Context, everybody. Yes. Thank you for being with us. We just came out of that clip before, and researchers are really speaking highly about Generation Z, but you see it a different way and see that there's something with digital and even their character that gives pause to celebration.
devices do not solve everything. And Generation Z is being hurried and hurt. And Generation Z needs healthy relationships that do not revolve around devices.
Very good. So it can't just be devices, it has to be more rounded existence. Awesome. Well, switching gears here, I also know that today might be your birthday as well.
Yes,
is that right?
it is.
Now here at Context, no one knows what's going to happen. It's always a surprise. And Aiden, our guest host, we want to celebrate you the right way. I figured, come on here, Aiden, we have a birthday gift for you here. Oh, you can present it. Hey. And from the Context family to your family, to you, want to say happy birthday. We'll get you to sing, but we won't, don't worry. Happy birthday. Give her another hand, everybody. Well, she's been called many things: eco-warrior, change maker, even the future of social media. Pretty good, hey, Aiden? At the age of 9, though, she started blogging about her passion and concern for the environment. Today, an activist at, get this, 11 years old. That same passion has taken her to national stages. I'm talking about We Day, for example. In this special edition of In Focus, I caught up with Hannah Alpert to learn more about how she is making a difference. Aiden, take a look at this. You created your blog, callmehannah.ca, at age 9 to share your growing concern and passion for the environment. But my question is, where did this all start from? Where did this all come from, this passion for the environment?
Well, my parents and I went to a digital family summit where families with tweens and teens can learn how to create and learn more about videos, gaming, and blogging. And I went to a blogging workshop where I created my blog, callmehannah.ca. And my parents wanted me to write about something that I was passionate about. They didn't want me to write about my life as a 9-year-old or what music I was listening to. My dad already had that covered. They wanted me to write something that I really, truly cared about. So I thought, what am I passionate about? So I realized that animals rely on the environment and that they rely on us to help the environment. And I love animals. I have a dog. I go to the zoo all the time. And I knew that they relied on us to help the environment and that we were destroying their habitats, their homes. And it is our doing that has put many species at risk of extinction. So I thought, why not blog about the environment and animals and how to help? So I did.
In your view, you believe it's the little things that we can do that bring about the most significant change. Speaking about the environment, what little things do you think we can do to bring change?
I think that just some simple things and some long-term things are also just pick up garbage whenever you see it. Don't drop litter on the ground. Like the earth is not your garbage can, right? Like, don't drop it on the ground. Pick it up if you ever see it. If you have a shoreline cleanup, even like you can even be by yourself when you're going out for a walk with your dog or just by yourself, take a bag with you, and if you see garbage, pick it up. And I hosted shoreline cleanup, and it was really fun. And I think something else is just use your voice, because that's the best thing that you can do, I think, with the environment and with all issues.
To a fellow Gen Zer watching the show, they could be at home and they're saying, you know what, I'm inspired by what Hannah Alpert is doing. I want to make that change. Look it in the camera lens now. Take a few moments to encourage them. And what would you say to that person saying, hey, I want to make change, I don't know how? What would you say?
I think I would tell them to find their spark. I mean, your spark is a big deal, and the spark is kind of what you love. So find your spark, then the next one, find your community. Find those other people that have the same passion, that same impact that you do. And remember that you're not alone.
Coming up, digital guru and author Don Tapscott with his thoughts on Generation Z and its pitfalls. And we ask, do God and Gen Z coexist? That's next.
I think it taps into a very fundamental thing. People want to change the world, and young people especially. And so often we tell young people they're too young, they need to wait. And what We Day shows is that youth are powerful. and that they can individually make an impact. And when you collect those impacts together, it can change the world. $45 million these young people have raised for 1,000 different charities, 15 million hours of service. They're, thanks to We365, the app, they're launching challenges to each other to get involved in giving blood and donating supportive causes and running marathons. The actions of these young people, it's incredible, and it just shows they're hungry to have an impact in this world.
Welcome back. Today we're talking about Generation Z, referring to those aged between 5 and 20 years old. Now, some researchers say they are primed to change our world. Here's what the Twitter universe is saying about Gen Z. Samantha Masaglia tweeted this: Gen Z Inventor creates a device that protects Alzheimer patients. Now, studio audience, those watching at home, I had to look this up. Monthly magazine, you can get it online or in hard copy. Scientific American. Watch this. It says this: teen wins big for his sock invention. Recipient of the Science in Action Award, a 15-year-old develops a sensor to monitor Alzheimer's patients. His name is Kenneth Shinizuka from the New York City area. He created, watch this, a small pressure sensor that can be attached to a foot or a sock. I see some people in the audience being like, tell me more. Well, I will. It notifies caregivers via their smartphones if a patient who should be sleeping gets out of bed. His grandfather, who had Alzheimer's disease, served as an inspiration for this. Very interesting. Look it up if you get a chance. Tweet number 2, Power of Collaboration tweeted, did you know 6-year-old claims, 6-year-olds, let me start with that. 6-year-old claims that they are more technologically savvy as 45-year-olds. Very interesting. Do you agree with that? 6-year-old to 45? Some saying yes, some saying no. Tweet number 3, Barnaby Finch asks, competitive, impatient, and narcissistic? Is your workplace ready for Generation Z? I don't know, we'll have to see. I caught up with digital guru and advisor Don Tapscott on what he had to say about Gen Z. Take a look at this.
Well, everybody's wringing their hands about digital natives and digital youth today. They're net addicted, glued to their mobile devices. The internet is eating the neocortex of youth today. They're the dumbest generation ever. That's what one book calls them. We've created a little army of narcissists. All they care about is themselves and tweeting and Facebook and Vines and selfies. This is a generation that has a terrible culture. They're a bunch of bullies. Actually, half of them are bullies and half aren't. And overall, this is a generation that's engaged in risky behavior, and the internet's at the heart of all of it. Everything that I just said is wrong, and none of it is supported by data. This is the smartest generation ever. We can be enormously hopeful about them. This is a generation with very strong values, and they're coming into society and into a workforce that's not prepared for them. First of all, we don't have jobs for them, and secondly, we have a bunch of old institutions from the industrial age that they can help us change. This is the first time in history when children are an authority about something really important. I was an authority about model trains when I was 11. Today, the 11-year-old is an authority on this revolution, this digital revolution that's changing every institution in society. Boomers, parents, teachers, lighten up. The kids are okay. Listen to them and they can help us.
Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey, last year issued a dire warning about the future of the church in Britain, saying Christianity is a generation away from extinction unless drastic changes are made to attract young people. In Canada, a quarter of the population don't identify with any religion. On top of that, researchers say interest continues to decline from one generation to the next in religion, reaching new lows among Gen Z. But for our next guest, it's a different reality. These Gen Zers not only display the stellar potential and ingenuity researchers rave about, but also a passion they say is rooted in a relationship with God, and it fuels everything else. Please welcome Jolene Awuku, Sasha Stewart, and Mikhail Kasweka to Context. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being with us. Appreciate it. Mikhail, Sasha, I want to start with you. You both are 20 years old, and you lead an organization that is working really to empower young women. Can you let me know a little bit more about that?
For sure. So before Clothed in Honor, I really felt a calling to impact my generation young women and young men. And I really had some ideas flowing with that. But I think as time progressed, I really felt that that same inspiration and passion was geared more to young women. And I think that it came from that place because I could share from my experiences with my sisters
Awesome.
in my generation. So that's where it came from. And then about 2 years ago, we really got started. And I think our friendship and having that friendship and friend by my side has allowed me to grow not only within the context of our organization, but as people in general as well. And from that place, we're able to share from a big sister sort of perspective.
So 20 years old, CEO, founder, vice president. It's called Clothed in Honor.
Yes.
Now, you're both people of faith. How does faith play a role in what you do?
Faith plays a huge role in what we do because we honestly believe that everything we do it flows out of a relationship with God. So faith plays a huge role, not only that, but we know that out of relationship with God, it impacts everybody else that we talk to, everybody else that we're in relationship with, everybody else that, something as simple, faith impacts us, something as simple as just saying hi to the person that's next to you that may be a little shy. It impacts everything that we do.
And you both see that need specifically around young girls, you're seeing.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Jolene, I want to turn to you, looking all sporty. You got the cutout, very good. You're 17 years old, and I want to make sure I can read this and get this correctly. You're speaking to audiences. I mean, upwards of sometimes hundreds. I heard you did one session that was upwards of thousands, which is amazing, through an organization called Revolutions, a part of Youth Unlimited. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so I am from a program called Revolutions, and it's a mentoring and biking program. So so they use biking as like the platform to bring people together to God, right? I don't like biking at all, but I love God.
Okay.
So win-win. So it just there's a small community where you go out and small things like raking people's leaves or going on a bike ride, and somehow these two will connect to God, and then they will pair us up with mentors. And these mentors aren't for tell me your problem and I can solve it. But as a friend, just to walk in life. So yeah.
Statistically, why we're kind of pinpointing on the spiritual element of all this is that the stats say that among all generations, Generation Z is the lowest among spiritual connectivity. They don't want one truth. They kind of are interested in all truths and want to bring it all together and kind of create their own. How does Gen Z survive? I'll start with you two, in this multi-faith world.
I think that we can survive by accepting each other, first of all, but I also think as young Christian people, we kind of have a different aspect to it. There's the story of the cross, and although there is the golden rule that says, do unto others as you would like to be done unto yourself, I think we can navigate throughout this generation by accepting other people, by also sharing the message of the cross, our spiritual truth as well, which I think can transcend in a lot of different faiths and can impact a lot of different faiths as well.
Jolene, what do you think? How do you survive in this multi-faith world? There's a lot of options.
Well, I remember a friend of mine asked me, what if you died and there was no God? And I was like, that would be disappointing, but it's like, if I choose to believe in some myth, and want to do good, or say I want to live better because I believe in this one thing, then it's just fine with me. And if someone doesn't believe in God or doesn't believe in the same God that I do, hey, we're all one and we're all brothers and sisters. So, I will treat you as I treat myself and as my brother. So awesome. It's all good.
Question two, I know it's all good. Question for you, Sasha. At the end of, call it 20 years from now, for example, what do you hope Generation Z will say to the world?
I really hope that in 20 years, people can look back at our generation, or maybe when we're a lot more mature, we can look back at our generation and say, wow, there were people that really, and sometimes, standing against the grain, having any faith, really, sometimes. That's what it is, and it takes so much courage. So I really hope that in that time, people can look at our generation and say, they were brave.
Thank you so much, Jolene Awuku, Sasha Stewart, and of course, Mikael Kasweka for joining me here on Context. Let's give them a big hand, everybody. Well, coming up, I share some closing thoughts on Generation Z and what's ahead. That's after the break.
Well, it's a familiar story. One generation worried about the next. A century ago, older folks worried about the children of the jazz age. Their children worried about baby boomers with their rock and roll. The boomers, in turn, worried about Gen X, Gen Y, and now Gen Z. Is Gen Z uninvolved? Well, 2 minutes listening to Hannah Alper shatters that mix. Are they spiritually indifferent? I think the snapshot you've seen into the lives of people like Sasha, Mikal, and Jolene bring a different picture into focus. As a youth pastor myself, I'm aware of the challenges that are ahead for Generation Z, but at the same time, I'm so very encouraged. They're spiritually curious and hungry to get involved with an unyielding passion to bring a sustainable change to this world. And if sometimes they may seem indifferent, specifically maybe to the things of God, it's always critical to look not just at them, but also how we, the generations before, are reaching out to them. Are we showing a love that is unconditional, non-judgmental, inviting? Are we engaging 21st century thinkers with a 21st century idea? Because I believe when we do this, we can inspire a generation to find a truth much bigger than us all. Well, for Lorna Duick and everyone here at Context and the crew behind me, I'm Sheldon Neil. Thank you for watching. Join us, Lorna Duick, that is, next week for more of Life Beyond the Headlines. Peace.